Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I would like to welcome you to our session, API Security and DDoS Protection on the Edge, presented by G-Core Labs and Wallarm. My name is Melissa Russell, and I will be your host for today's event. Before we get started with the presentation, we wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. We do have a lot of content to cover, so we'll get started. Today's event is being recorded, and it is also being streamed to LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. For those of you on the LinkedIn event, we have put a link to Zoom so that you can register if you would like to get a direct email with a copy of the slides as well as the recording. So if you want to go ahead and just pop your info in there, we'll make sure that you get there even while you're enjoying the presentation on LinkedIn. We will be saving some time at the end for Q&A, but please feel free to enter questions into the Q&A box as they arise, and we will try to address as many of those as possible. For those of you on the LinkedIn stream, please go ahead and put any questions that might arise in the comments section, and I'll make sure that we try and address those as well. And at this time, I'd like to introduce our speakers today. I'm thrilled to introduce our first speaker, Adi Lavi, who is the VP of Partnerships at Wallarm, and he is joined today by Jasper Nicholas, who is the General Manager of APAC for the G-Core Labs. Gentlemen, it's time for you to take it away.
Thank you, Melissa. So good morning. I believe most of you are in the morning zone. Good evening here from San Diego, California. So we put a lot of content here for you. I hope you're going to enjoy it. I have a feeling that you will. And again, the topic is API security and DDoS protection on the edge for APAC, especially for the FinTech industry. So just kind of to let you know, we compiled information from various sources. First of all, from our customers, then also from kind of leading analysts, as well as some leading tools and companies. So I will share that information with you as well. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about kind of APIs. And obviously, I didn't put any poll here for you guys, but if you're not directly involved in API development or DevOps and so forth, if I had asked you how much of the traffic of API is of web traffic is actually API based, I'm not sure that you will give me the number that you see here on the screen. So based on kind of the data that we're seeing from leading CDN providers, 83% of all web traffic are generated by APIs. So when you think about, this is not like 50, 60, this is like overwhelming majority of the number of API traffic, of web traffic is actually API traffic. The other data that I want to share with you is coming from Gartner. So 90% of applications will have more surface area for attacks in the form of exposed APIs. So obviously, if we have a lot of APIs, then the surface area for attackers is very, very big. And also, when we look at the latest attacks in 2021 as well as 2022, again, information coming from Gartner, API will be the #1 attack vector. And when you see kind of some of the logos here on the screen, we're not talking about just like startups or small companies. We're also talking about big companies, mature companies, companies that have established security teams and processes. So how come, even if the company has very established security practices, security tools, how come they're still suffering from security incidents and attacks? So we will try to answer that question as we go along through this presentation. When we talk about specifically about FinTech, there are 4 types of cybersecurity incidents that I would like to mention. The first one is service disruption. So obviously, if the service is not up and running, then the application is not generating any income. And when we're talking about FinTech and financial services, the product is finance, right? Is money. So it's very easy to calculate the loss of income when the service is not up and running. And now there are a few ways, obviously, to have this disruption of the service. One of them is obviously DDoS attack, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. But when we're talking about API, that also could be some sort of a business logic that is being abused. So think about if there's an API request that takes a long time to process due to some sort of a business logic, and then if you send enough of those API requests, the service can slow down and eventually fail. So that's with regards to service disruption. Moving on to the second one, and that is account takeover. And here, attackers are basically trying to take over users' accounts and take advantage of whatever they can, right? It could be PII data, financial data, or even creating fraudulent transactions that we're gonna talk about it next. So here the attackers, they're basically targeting authenticated APIs to take over the customer accounts. There are many names for these types of attacks: credential stuffing, brute force attack. Attackers are also trying to bypass authentication, steal tokens, compromise multi-factor authentication. Again, these are all API-based services. So again, there are many ways that type of an attack can happen, but they all fall under the same goal, and that is kind of to take over the customer account. Next one, we talk about fraudulent transaction, and here again, you know, this is really challenging, especially for the fintech industry, because fraudulent transaction means funds being taken away from the account. And I'm very much into crypto. If we talk about crypto, once the transaction has been done, it's you're screwed basically, right? I mean, go chase the transaction. We're seeing with previous attacks, it takes years to recover some of the funds, if not all the funds, but we're not being told the amount of resources and funds that have put in order to recover those funds. So obviously fraudulent transactions are a big issue for the fintech industry. And then lastly, not specifically only for the fintech industry, but obviously still a very big issue is data exfiltration. And here we're talking most of the time some sort of unauthorized access to a database. So again, if there's a vulnerable API that was not configured correctly or was exploited, more data was extracted than it was intended, and there's access to some sort of a database, this is what we're talking about, data exfiltration. And again, if I give example from crypto, if we're talking about encryption keys, that could be devastating, and that also falls under the umbrella of fintech and financial services. So moving on, the way we put together this presentation is basically talking about kind of top challenges. So as I go along, we put together this list of top challenges for fintech, and I'll go one by one. So the first one is API and application usage has been exploded. So when we talk about APIs, there are different types of APIs. There are public, partner, and private APIs. So let's talk about them one by one. So when we talk about public APIs, that's obviously the APIs that are accessible to the internet. And normally we're talking about here your mobile apps and your single page application. These are kind of two examples for public API. When we talk about partner API, there are many types of partner API that could be for data exchange, for communication. It could be to get some service, right? Multi-factor authentication, KYC. We'll talk about those examples also later on. But basically company to company, service to service. So that is kind of the partner API. And then lastly, we're talking about private APIs. And kind of the best example here is like microservices or service mesh, basically APIs that are not exposed outside of your infrastructure. And here we're going to use data from Postman from 2021, State of the API report. And for those of you who don't know what Postman is a very well-known API development tool. So if you're a developer, I have no doubt that you know what Postman is. So they did a survey over for their users, and they talked about API. So this is the data that they found. So private APIs consist of 58% of the total APIs. The partner APIs 27%, and public APIs only 15%. So if you think about it from the outside, what we see is the public APIs. You can see that is actually a small fraction of the total APIs that companies actually have. So when we talk about the challenge of the hyper growth of the usage of API, the challenge here is API discovery and inventory. And the challenge here is real and is massive. Again, I'm not going to do any polls here, but like you can ask yourself or ask somebody in your organization, do we know what is the number of APIs that we have in the company? And based on our experience, companies that we work with, POC that we do in the FinTech industry and other industries, the answer is never yes. And it's very, very challenging. So there are two kind of main buckets. One is what is called kind of managed APIs, and they're managed if your company is using some sort of API management and API gateway. So here you have an idea of the type of APIs that you have, potentially even what data they carry, right? So this is kind of data classification. That's kind of the second layer of API discovery. But even with the managed traffic, you still have what is called zombie APIs. These are basically APIs that have been deprecated. They're not in use anymore, but they're still exposed to the internet. So most of the times, these are not kept up to date with all the security controls. Most likely they're the low-hanging fruit for the attackers. And then as well as legacy APIs, and we'll talk about legacy systems as well, but that also exists especially when you talk to FinTech industries. Data by Gartner here, so by 2025, less than 50% of enterprise API will be managed. So there is also what is called kind of unmanaged APIs. You want to enable your developers to move very, very, very fast. You have roadmap that you have to meet. There is competition in the marketplace. You don't want to slow down your developers. So these are called managed APIs. Basically, developers have the freedom to expose those APIs and use them, right? So they're unmanaged. It's very difficult to have the discovery and the inventory of those APIs. Moving forward, I just want to talk, before we talk about the next challenge, just to touch on zero trust. So obviously zero trust is a big item, a topic by itself. COVID changed a lot or everything when we talk about zero trust. But most of companies, when they consider zero trust, they consider more about talking or taking care of users and public services. So for people who still not aware of what zero trust is, so it used to be, right, people were used to be in the office, you had the perimeter, and then you have limited ways of getting into the environment. Think about like a gate, like a door, right? So you can protect the door, and then once you're inside the door, you can trust the people inside. Well, now when we talk about zero trust, everybody is at home. You don't have like two headquarters. Now you have thousands of headquarters because everybody is at home. So the zero trust, or kind of the perimeter, if we even say a perimeter anymore, is extended everywhere. So the challenge here is APIs or services that used to be internal under the old model now needs to be external, right? So how do you protect, how do you manage these types of services? So I just want to mention zero trust here too, when we're talking about API, and especially the private APIs and services. Moving on, challenge number 2, high velocity of innovation and increased complexity of APIs. So I touched on it a little bit, right? But especially when we talk about FinTech here, the FinTech industry is innovating really, really fast, using cutting edge technology. And, when a new solution is coming out, not all the ducks are in a row. and there are some security vulnerabilities that are being discovered post implementation, right? If the example that I can think of is like Kubernetes. So when it came out, right, well-known tech, very good tech, a lot of advantages, everybody starting to use Kubernetes, and then a few months later on, vulnerabilities and holes in the technology were discovered, right? So that's also a challenge for the fintech industry, the rate of innovation. And we also maybe we're about to stop with all the crazy funding rounds, but at least until 2022, I saw data that says that a unicorn, there's a new unicorn 2 a day or something like that. So $1 billion valuation is not a lot anymore, right? So there's a massive rounds of funding. The roadmap is very, very aggressive. So the teams have to work really, really fast. So again, really, really fast, really, really aggressive. Some things are being left behind. So that's the challenge. And some of the times security is one of them. Let's move on. We talked about rate of innovation. Let's talk about solutions, protocols, and tech stack. So here you have some of the new protocols for API. If we talk about GraphQL, it was hardly used a few years ago. So here Gartner said, but that by 2025, more than 50% of the enterprises will use GraphQL in production. And that's up than less than 10% in 2021, right? So like 4 years, major increase in one of the new protocol for API, right? And this is not the only one, right? You have gRPC, you have WebSocket, you have others. So again, the innovation is really fast. New protocols are up and coming. A new protocol per use case is changing. So that's it's challenging to have the right solution in place in order to keep your security up to date, as well as we're talking about new tech stack, right? I mean, service mesh is up and coming. Kubernetes, again, that did not exist, I don't know, a few years ago, several years ago. And we talked a little about zero trust. So new stack, we have fewer best practices. It takes time until the best practices come to light and we can use it. So that's a challenge. And again, when you have new stack, I like this phrase, it's like more known unknowns and more unknowns for security teams, right? So more things that you know that you don't know, and more things that you don't even know that you don't know, right? So it's definitely very challenging. Let's move on. Challenge number 3, highly sophisticated attack, highly motivated attackers. So this is obviously quite specific to the fintech industry when we're talking about money, right? The product, the service is money. I don't know if there's anything more motivated to attackers than funds. It could be, dollars, yen, whatever currency your country is in, or, again, cryptocurrency, right? I mean, that's up and coming type of currency. So why? You want to have access to funds, and the way attackers are trying to attack fintech. There, we talked about. So the attack surface is huge. They have many options. They can go after the logging, the authentication. They can exploit the MFA APIs, database, legacy. So there are many ways that they can get in. And obviously, again, the impact is once they got in. Some of the times it's not reversible. Most of the times it's going to take a lot of time and resources to get those funds back. And if we talk a little bit kind of an example, so Log4Shell, I'm sure everybody is aware of, heard of it if you're living on planet Earth. So we saw with our customer that 12 hours post the disclosure, attackers already innovated and not went after the traditional log4shell endpoint, but also, for example, we saw trying to exploit gRPC that was not even known at the time that it was even possible, right? So attackers are innovating by them alone, right? Because they're trying to get an edge on the security team. So just an example, right? If you have something that the attackers are going after, you're going to have highly sophisticated type of attack, and it's a challenge, definitely, not just for the security team, right? For all of the organization, especially when we're talking about FinTech. Okay, we're already at challenge number 4, and this is, let's bring on the big guns, right? Compliance. Definitely a big challenge for everybody. And if we talk about FinTech, maybe healthcare is on par with regulated industry, but FinTech is definitely one of the most regulated industries. If we want to talk about compliance and regulatory requirement, we probably can have a webinar just on that. And another challenge is that the world is like a one big place, right? So even if you're launching somewhere, so I'm in California, it doesn't mean that I only need to be compliant with CCPA, right? If my customers are in Europe, then GDPR. If my customers are in New York, even, so there are other local requirements, let alone in other parts of the world. So you need to know and be compliant with all the requirements where your end customer is, not just where you are. So that's definitely a big challenge to follow compliance and to be compliant. And obviously the fines, if something happens, are astronomical. So actually, where do you start with compliance? A good place to start is to have a very good inventory of your API discovery and API classification. So you'll know where your APIs are and which ones carry sensitive data. And then lastly, I just want to talk about open banking initiatives. Does it help being more compliant? I really hope so. I only know that it requires us, the FinTech industry, to be more open and provide more access to our customers and other services. And when you're opening the door, right, you also bring on bad actors. So hopefully it's doing more good than bad. Okay, let's move on to challenge number 5. So challenge number 5, third-party dependencies. So not only that you need to make sure that your company is secure, you also need to make sure that third parties and your partners, they're also secure. So we're talking about like 3rd to 9th party partner APIs, and every time I see 9th, it takes me back to my engineering time in college. So let's talk about third party first. So what are we talking about third party? Third party is basically any partner API that you are integrated with, communicating with, to get data, exchange data, or to get any sort of service. So examples here is like, for the FinTech industry, we're talking about payment processing, KYC, know your customer, FIDO, which is kind of the passwordless authentication method, multi-factor authentication, right, and many others. So this is about your partners, and we talk about the nth as like, are you sure that they're not using any partners, and are their partners secure? Can you trust the data that you receive? So if somebody passed the multi-factor authentication and you getting an approval, can you trust that that approval was not compromised, right? FIDO, again, somebody did the authentication and you getting authorization that the user can move on or the service can move on. Can you trust that data, right? So that's a very big challenge. And again, this is when we're talking about 3rd to 9th party partner APIs. Challenge number 6, legacy systems. So this is definitely very much specific to the FinTech and the financial service industry. I cannot think of, again, of another vertical that has to deal with more legacy services than the financial services, right? The FinTech industry is moving so fast, cutting edge tech, but you have to talk to legacy system, right? The SOAP APIs and other very legacy protocols. So legacy systems, legacy protocols, unfortunately, most of the times are less secure. They're harder to patch. They're harder to monitor. They don't support the newest monitoring tool. So that's definitely the low hanging fruit for attackers. And I don't know if it's still accurate, but when Log4Shell came out, I read a lot of articles that it's going to be with us for years because it's touching legacy system that have been around for many, many years. So it will take years to patch those systems. So we'll see if that is still the case. But that's just like an example, right? When you find a vulnerability with a legacy system, it's very, very challenging to fix and patch it. All right, let's talk about challenge number 7, availability. So when we talk about availability, we talk about uptime, scalability, low latency, right? Time is money. I actually don't know where this phrase is coming from, but I figured there's no better industry or better time to use it than here, right? If you're not up, you're not making money. So when we talk about availability, there is the ease of deployment, it should have been. So a lot of tools cannot easily be deployed using cloud native environment like Kubernetes, for example, or service mesh. So you want to have solutions that can be integrated easily. Cloud native tech stack. So whatever, again, FinTech, very innovative, using cutting edge tech stack. You want your team, you want the solution to use the same tools that your DevOps teams are using, right? So there will be like an easy integration between solutions you're using and solutions and tools that your DevOps teams are using. And then lastly, performance. You never want your security solution to slow down the application. That affects the user experience, that affects conversion. That is true not only for FinTech, but again, it's very easy to measure loss of a customer when there's a slow performance. So security solutions must keep up with the market requirements. And we can't talk about availability without talking about DDoS. So at this time, I want to call on Jasper from G-Core to talk about DDoS and other things that he has on his plate. Jasper, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eddie. I'm sorry, I'm just having some trouble with my slides here. Hello, everyone. I'd like to talk about the challenges for DDoS protection. So all banks and financial institutions operate in very sensitive conditions. And any kind of downtime for them equals losing customer loyalty or money in case of service outages. That's why DDoS attacks, as the most popular and affordable attack vector, can cause chaos for any banking or digital initiatives. According to our research, DDoS attacks account for about 35 to 40% of the total number of attacks at the application level. To mitigate this threat, your business needs a powerful network of traffic filtering nodes. And increasingly, DDoS flood is used as a component for hybrid attacks. And when volumetric activity distracts the client security system, while the second attack vector performs unauthorized access. This flowchart basically shows how attackers generate spam traffic to overwhelm your targeted web server. And our web security module acts as a filtering and mitigation layer to protect your web server, the client's web server, from incoming traffic. So the DDoS protection layer provided by G-Core Labs works in tandem with the web application firewall layer and the bot layer to make sure that there's no downtime from the client's web server. This chart shows you an example of a high rate attack where the duration for the attack is about 6 hours. And we have around 35,000 requests per second that is that's being thrown at the network. And as you can see here, all of the unauthorized interactions are successfully blocked by our filtering node. And as a result, there's zero downtime from the client's perspective. It means it's business as usual. This next one is an example of a hybrid attack where there's a high rate of volumetric attacks coming from the L3 and L4 layer, which is a DDoS layer. And you can see the spike here. That's about 1.6 million requests per second, while on the web application firewall layer, there's also hacking attacks that are being done. So our filtration system, the protection system, is able to mitigate all of those attacks. This slide shows us how our security architecture is set up in such a way where incoming traffic, incoming web security traffic, and incoming non-HTTP traffic flow through the system. The first filtration system is the DDoS protection layer. And at the DDoS layer, we mitigate TCP floods, UDP floods, any kind of volumetric attacks that are being thrown into the system. The next layer is the L7 protection, where there's bot protection for robotic attacks. We protect against botnets, brute force attacks, spamming. And at the final layer is the web application firewall layer, which is provided by our partner Wallarm. So in this architecture, we ultimately protect the client's web server. G-Core Labs global DDoS protection system provides you with safety for volumetric attacks, connection attacks, and L7 DDoS attacks. What are the key benefits of using our system? The globally distributed network filters traffic all around the world, which will always exceed any single DDoS attack. We have over 140 points of presence worldwide. We have 110 terabits per second in our global network capacity, and 8 years of successful web protection experience. The next slide shows our clients. I was previously working for wargaming.net as a game publisher for the Asia Pacific region, and I can attest to the stability of the service that G-Core Labs provides. And today I serve as a GM for APAC. responsible for taking care of the business here and for expanding to further clients. Our key partners are listed here, and Wallarm, of course, our key partner for security services, will continue to talk about protection from the API layer. Eddie?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about Wallarm. So we started the company in 2016, so we've been around for kind of several years. You can see here, and we added capabilities, starting with SOAP and REST when we talked about kind of legacy, and up to API discovery and zombie. Even though we started as 5-6 years ago, we are cloud native company. We support all the deployment methods and the tools. We use them in-house when we talk about our tech stack, and that helps us also support our customers. So how do we address all these challenges that we talked about with regards to API security, especially for the FinTech industry? So the first thing that we do is discover, right? We talked a lot about API discovery. You can't protect what you don't know, and also you need to know what type of data is passing through that API. So the first thing that we do is API topology. And the cool feature that we have is actually that we reconstruct the API specs from the actual traffic. So you don't need to upload the spec, the schema, the documentation. We do it for you from the actual traffic that we see, and actually then you can compare the discovery the traffic that we discovered with your documentation, right? And you see if there are any changes, design versus implementation, right? Because we give you what is the actual traffic that's passing through your application. And once we have a baseline, now you can set alerts in our system to see any new asset, application, or API traffic that we detect. And again, you can compare it to see if that's a change, if that change was intended by design or whatever. So these are kind of the features that we provide around API discovery that we provide our customers, obviously. Next, we talk about protection, right? So everything about threat protection. So very, very important. We support all protocols, right? We talked about gRPC and GraphQL up and coming, but we already support REST, WebSocket that everybody is using, as well as legacy protocols such as SOAP. So whatever you guys are using, we already support it, and we will support if there are any new protocols that are coming. When we talk about threat, we protect your application and your API from all the threats that are available: OWASP top 10, top API, API abuse, and so forth. And another very cool feature that we have is that this is tuning free, right? There's no manual tuning, no manual rules. It's not based on regular expression. This is based on grammar detection. Basically, same way as we are speaking English one another right now, and you hopefully can understand what I'm saying and understand that I'm not slurring at you. That is very similar to how we do the detection. If we understand the protocol, if we understand the request, then we can know what is malicious and what is not. So that is with regards to protect. And then lastly is respond. All right, so everything has to do with visibility. We give you the option to drill down into malicious attacks, attack insights, advanced analysis. We also have automated response. You can see here active threat verification. This is something actually that I do want to touch on. So as you can see here in the image, so you see attacks, right? So attacks, this is basically the total number of requests that we have detected and blocked because they are malicious requests, right? So first of all, this is the first level of benefit. We stop those attacks, but we don't stop there. We actually, as you see here, 22 incidents. So we're basically taking that request and taking that type of attack, and we are trying to see, we're basically using the in-house scanner capability. The scanner capability is included within the product, and we're scanning the product using that method of attack to see if the application is actually vulnerable. So first level of benefit, we stop the attack. Second level of benefit, is the application actually vulnerable for this type of an attack? So we're actually helping the application be more secure, helping hardening the application from future attacks. Another way, if you want to look at it, we are using kind of the attackers as pen testers, right? I mean, whatever way it's easier for you to understand, but that's kind of the idea, is that two-level, and our customers are really happy and they see it very useful. So as you can see here, 22 types of incidents. That's basically, out of these types of an attacks, we validated that actually the application is vulnerable for 22 types of an attack. That is a security incident, right? There is an alert, we alert the SOC, whatever the playbook is with the customer. Right, so I just wanted to mention that, the active threat verification, and then DevSecOps tools. So again, we are cloud native type of a solution, right? So we use those integration and those solutions in-house. So we have integration with all SIEM, SOAR, incident response, right? Whatever you're using, we support and we can integrate. If we talk about deployment options, again, because we're cloud native, it's very easy for us to integrate anywhere. If you're already a G-Core Lab customer or planning on being a G-Core Lab customer, we already took care of the integration for you. You want to use Wallarm, you just flip a switch and we're up and running. If you have other assets that are not behind G-Core Labs or in a different cloud environment, no problem. You can deploy Wallarm there, and then basically you have a unified security solution across all of your infrastructure. If you're using serverless technology, checkmark support, no problem. Any container technology that you might use, we support that as well. Any type of proxy, machine, or even API management, we're also integrating with API management. That is to say that we can integrate anywhere, right? I mean, whatever your infrastructure looks like, especially FinTech, right? When we're talking about cutting edge, everything is cloud native. We're mostly talking about Kubernetes, so some sort of a container. We support it easily, no problem. So that is it. That was my last slide. I think we have some time left for some questions. So thank you very much so far for listening in. And we're open to get questions.
Yeah, so I'm going to cover a couple of them that I think I can actually answer. I've had one question come in about whether or not this can count towards continuing education credit or CES credit. If you want to email me at mrussell@wallarm.com, I'll also put it in the chat function. I can provide you a certificate of attendance, which typically will count towards 1 hour for credit. So yes, we do provide that. We're just not affiliated with anyone specifically, but typically they will accept that for this. We also had another question specifically about the webinar slides. For those of you who are on the Zoom or who have come over to the Zoom and just registered, you will receive an email with a link to the recording, as well as a link to a PDF of the slides. So we will make those available. Again, if you, for any reason, are not and you're on the LinkedIn channel, please just reach out to either Requests at Wallarm or the G-Core team. We're all happy to provide it to you, no problem. So just want to make sure I covered that because I had several people ping on that one. But I do have a question that came in on the LinkedIn channel. I believe it's for the G-Core team. And Andre, I believe you're online that can help answer this one. The question was, how do you identify or filter a valid request from requests that are part of DDoS? So if you can just make sure you're unmuted and maybe you can help answer that one.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. So there is two major parts for that kind of analysis. The first part is behavioral analysis, because in most cases, the behavior of attacker is quite different than the behavior of the common users. For example, the attacker in most cases just send a lot of requests to the same URL. And another part is technical analysis of the request. Just to give you the idea about that, you can check the following keywords in Google, like J3 fingerprinting, P0F fingerprinting. So when we try to understand if the user agent which sent by the customer is really the true one or is the fake. So that's one of the techniques. So we check the technical part, we check the behavioral part, and based on that analysis, we just make a final decision to block or not to block that attack.
Thank you so much. Sorry, let me answer this one again. Certificates of attendance, M. Russell, RUSSELL @wallarm.com. Adam Bishop, I will send it to you directly, but it's just my first initial for Melissa, and Russell, RUSSELL @wallarm.com. That's how you get the certificate of attendance. And yes, again, for everyone who's still popped in who might not have heard, we will share the slide deck for everybody. So I think we're at this point, I'm not seeing anything else. So if there were any other questions, please go ahead and enter them into the Q&A. I'm going to scroll through the LinkedIn just to make sure we didn't miss anything. And gentlemen, I think that is it on the side of the questions. However, I do really want to especially throw out a big thank you, especially to our friends and family here that are all out in the APAC region. It's not often that we're often on the same time for you. So greatly appreciate that you were actually able to join us in person this time. I do get a lot of feedback that it'd be nice to be in some different time zones, and we hope to see you all on the next webinar in the future. I also want to thank our speakers, Adi Lavi, who again is our VP of Partnerships at Wallarm, and Jasper Nicholas, the General Manager of APAC for G-Core. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any of us, and we hope to see you on a webinar here in the future. Thanks, everyone.